everybody. So I've been in just sort of like a mood lately, I guess, of reflection or whatever. So I just wanted to highlight some of like the weird medical things that have happened in the last 2.5 years. Like, it's mind blowing that all this stuff even happened at all. I kind of outlined 7 areas. I'll start from like the least to the most, I guess. So the least, or like number 7, is when I first got sick. And actually this is one of the most impactful mentally and emotionally, because I mean it was just a really scary time in my life mentally. Like, I've never have been that sick before. I thought I was gonna die all the time. And I was alone, in Charlotte. But so I just randomly got really sick. I was at a wedding, dancing, having a good time. All of a sudden, I just couldn't walk anymore. My joints, I just thought I danced too much, my legs were tired, my knees were hurting. But it just got worse and worse. My legs started swelling, I got this rash, I got a fever. When I went back home from the wedding, I went to doctors, they took a blood test and saw my blood levels were getting lower significantly. They just stayed lower. And so that whole process of, I'm at this wedding having a good time, to, oh my goodness, I can't walk. I was dragging myself in my house from my room to get to the bathroom. For a while I was still even trying to go to work, and I would like hang on to the edges of the cube to walk to get to my desk. So it was just something. The doctors never found out what it was, but something really hit me. Number 6 in this venture, I think, is important to note that I was misdiagnosed a lot in the beginning. We just weren't sure what was wrong with my blood. We thought I had ITP, so I was given rituximab, which is technically a chemotherapy for ITP, which I turns out didn't have. So, sort of the cynical joke I make with people is that I was like pretty much accidentally given chemotherapy for a disease I didn't have. But granted, rituximab's not actually that bad of chemos, and I've had it so many times since. And now I do have ITP, but whatever, besides the point. So that whole just time of not knowing and being misdiagnosed, and the hospital in Charlotte eventually said, we just can't provide for you anymore, and they sent me to Duke. And Duke had more specialties with aplastic anemia and PNH and bone marrow transplants. So that was really helpful. Number 5, getting more the severity, I guess, of weird medical issues, is receiving horse ATGAM, or HATG, which is basically like you get injected like an IV of horse protein, more or less, and it's a biotherapy, so it's supposed to attack your immune system. And it's very unnatural. Like, it is unnatural, because at least for me, the allergic reactions to this medicine, my whole body was like a zebra. I was covered in hives and rash. I had a fever. One of my friends came to visit me in Duke, and she, like, within minutes when the medicine started, like, I just started getting a little itchy, and then all of a sudden, like, my whole body was just red, and I was itchy for weeks. And I was just covered in hives, which was really mind-blowing at the time, that like my body was reacting in such a physical way, physical and direct way to this medicine. You just know it's so unnatural. Nowadays, I've actually had that medicine again. It wasn't as bad, but that was my first big experience with, like, medicines are intense. And that medicine ran, I think, for like almost 5 days straight, or like increments of 12 hours over 5 days. You get it for a long time. So number 4 on the weird medical things was still, to me, very weird just in life. So for thyroid cancer, I had iodine radiation, where you take a pill of radioactive iodine and you ingest it, so then you become radioactive. So every day in the hospital, someone would come in and measure me with like a meter about how many like millicuries I was emitting per distance, and I became a hazard. So like I stayed in the hospital because I shouldn't be around kids, and I lived with my family because I could like radiate and contaminate them. Everything in my room in the hospital was covered in plastic or paper so they could properly dispose of it after. Nurses had to wear a badge. They could only be in their room for less than 5 minutes. It was like really strict nuclear quarantine because you were emitting radiation, which is kind of like a weird concept, but kind of cool, I guess. The also sucky part about iodine radiation is that it affects your salivary glands. So at Hershey, they made me suck on lemons once every hour, I think for 24 hours. So every hour I would wake up and I was exhausted. Like you're like horribly exhausted through this whole process. Horribly exhausted. And, but I'd wake up to save my salivary glands and drink some lemon juice and munch on a lemon, and it's like torture. Like a weird, cruel, unusual punishment torture. So glad that's over. The next is thyroid surgery, which it's up so high because in my head, I guess I just thought it wouldn't be that bad. To some extent, like thyroid cancer is pretty common compared to bone marrow failure, and I had already been through bone marrow failure. And you know, people do thyroid surgery all the time. It's more routine. But that it was hard. You have to go on a low iodine diet beforehand for the radiation. That was hard. But for the surgery, I mean, you can see like they literally like slit your neck open. I look like Sally from Halloween, that Halloween movie, and I couldn't move. I was under anesthesia for 6 hours, and that gave me horrible headaches. And for at least a week, I was not moving. Like I couldn't even open up my own pill bottles at home, really. And talking, I couldn't talk for quite a while, for probably at least a week. So that was tough. That was tougher than I thought it would be. I had really good support at my family's house. My nieces, you know, would read stories to me and watch movies with me, and my mom would help get food. So I would not have been able to do thyroid surgery, lymph node and thyroid surgery without that support. And so we're at number 2. So 2 is typically actually like considered a really, really big process, but it's at 2 just because it was expected. So 2 is a bone marrow transplant, which I had last year. And, you know, bone marrow transplants are a big deal. Statistically, like 30% of people don't survive. You're in the hospital for over a month. It's, you know, it's a big process. The chemotherapies, the radiations, the lost my hair, it's a lot. The reason I have it at number 2 is because it was planned. You know, we knew that I needed it. We knew what to expect. University of Pennsylvania, they had like a classroom online session, and they sent out booklets of like instructions and prep and scheduling and what to bring, what to expect. They like really, really, really prepared you for, hey, like, you're gonna lose your hair. Hey, you might not be able to eat solid food. Hey, you're gonna be really exhausted. You're gonna be nauseous. You're gonna be tired. But we have exercise bikes for you. We want you to walk every day if you can. We have special drinks. We have special, like, immune system implementations in place. We have special care. That they were very, very hands-on and proactive with preparing you for this really big procedure. And I was in the hospital for over a month. And chemotherapy is really hard, the couple that I had. And I had complications, which they also prepare you for, you know, that there's lots of people can have complications. So I will say that during this time, there was 2 times in the last 2.5 years, I think, that I said, I'm tired and I feel like giving up. And one of them was during this time. Nosebleeds, low platelet problem. I get nosebleeds a lot. It's horrible, like just blood gushing out my mouth, out my nose, so much blood everywhere. And I had this nosebleed, and I was exhausted and nauseous, and, you know, during this transplant, and it was lasting for hours and hours, and I ended up, that was the only time I ever just said, I'm just gonna let it bleed, and I fell asleep. And I woke up in, like, a bunch of blood, but, and it's fine, like, we fixed it. We had to wait for the nose doctors to come, but, yeah, that was probably one of the lower points. But the other points were back actually at number 7, when I was just really scared all the time, because I just didn't know what was going on. But, yeah, so bone marrow transplants are tough. But I am fully thankful that UPenn prepared me and had a very, like, designated process. Yeah. So number 1, which is more number 1 just because it was so odd and sudden and my mind is still blown that it even happened. But it was just like the whole time when I couldn't walk. One day I could walk fine, more or less. And then the next day I couldn't stand without getting dizzy and blacking out. And walking, I would pass out. I'd hit the floor. And so I was in bed for 3 weeks, over almost 3 weeks, I think. You know, going to the bathroom in bed. Like, I wasn't able to stand up on my own. And I had blood clots in my arm very suddenly that just kind of appeared too. And I couldn't move my arm. There was so much pain. So I couldn't get out of bed. And I couldn't move my arm. And that was a point where I was like, wow, like, my body is, well, like, disaster hit. So that was just weird because we didn't know why, and it happened very suddenly. And in that time, to combat it, I was on high-dose steroids. So the steroids were helping, but once they were helping, high-dose steroids, maybe it should be the number itself, but I would be awake for 48 hours straight, just pacing my room. Literally, like, just awake, fidgeting. Steroids really affect who you are. They make your face puffy. I'm back on steroids right now. My face is puffy. When I was on that many steroids, it was like 100 milligrams for months. Yeah, I would just walk around all night, all day. Kind of like a zombie. Really weird state to be in. But so that whole group of time, I was in hospital that time for over a month also, of just not being able to walk, going to the bathroom in bed, you know, and then not being able to stop, was just a really weird time in my body, and we weren't really sure why, but yeah, so those are my top 7. I will also mention that over the last 2.5 years, I wrote it down, so I don't forget anything. My body has not been what I want it to be, obviously, but in the last 2.5 years, I've had bone marrow failure, partial liver failure, partially collapsed lung, acute kidney failure, thyroid cancer, a somewhat fractured hip, severe nosebleeds, and the inability to walk on my own. Also, forgot to mention, there was that time when I turned purple. I'm still a little purple. Not 100% sure why about that either, but it just covers most of my body. My body just hasn't been doing so well, like all these organs that have partially failed. But I'm going, you know, I'm making this video and I feel okay right now, so it's just this weird thing to comprehend. I also listed some of the medicines that I've taken over the last 2.5 years. I'll read them off again. So 4 different chemotherapies, 1 biotherapy, 2 different radiations, a bone marrow transplant, long-term high-dose steroids, and probably over 50 bags of platelets and red blood cells. I haven't counted them all, but thank you to the people who donate blood, because that is a big portion of why I'm still alive. But yeah, so thanks. I know this is a super long video and I'm just talking, and thanks for making it this far in the video. I'm quarantining, so making these videos, talking to this camera is kind of like most of the only talking I do ever. And it just helps me too, like just thinking through all of this. What the heck, you know, like it's just a weird concept to comprehend, that my body has done all this stuff. But yeah, you know, still chugging along, still have hope, and thanks for watching, and check back next week for another video.